So, the last Manic Monday ever, for now at least, is in the books, and indeed, it was quite the Manic Monday. I mean, with the conjunction of Middle Sunday and Manic Monday, Manic Monday is cool, but with Middle Sunday, I just want to say that I am so happy that they are getting rid of that. I know it's tradition. I know it's exclusive to Wimbledon, and some people may think that's cool. I do not like that tradition at all. I find it to be quite senseless, and prior to the roof being installed on center court and court number 1, it was actually detrimental at times. I'm looking at you, 2007 Wimbledon. And just has caused some scheduling nightmares, so I found getting rid of it to be quite practical, and I'm quite happy that from next year on we won't have to deal with that anymore. But anyways, getting into the matches today, of course, the first one of the day on center court, up top in the draw, the world number 1 Novak Djokovic against Christian Garin. There is absolutely no surprise with how this match went. I mean, I just want to say, what the hell is Christian Garin doing anywhere near the 4th round or 2nd week of Wimbledon? I'm aware that his draw was just an absurdly soft portion of the draw, but my goodness, I mean, we expected it to be ugly, and honestly the scoreline does not reflect how just lopsided this match was. Garin just had nothing to hurt Novak with, and you could see this coming, but to be fair, Djokovic, to this point, all tournament really, aside from the Anderson match, it still feels like he's a good ways away from his best, and that's not to say that, he's in trouble. The next quality opponent he faces, he's going to be trouble playing like that. I'm not there, because with this draw, that's not going to happen really until maybe the semis and the final. And even then, even if you had thrown the hardest draw possible at him, Novak just always knows when to dial in. Right now, he's basically just cruising, not expending that much energy doing so. And why would he? He doesn't really need to. And we all know he's still perfectly capable of taking it up a couple notches. And nothing that we've seen has changed what we've all pretty much felt about this tournament from the beginning, that it is Djokovic against the field. I obviously made it clear that I am taking Djokovic for this fortnight, and his demolition job of the ill-equipped Christian Garin on this surface doesn't really move the needle either way for me on that. He's going to be playing Marton Fucsovics, not Andrei Rublev, who a lot of us did expect to be potentially Djokovic's toughest test in this half, and I was among those, but in retrospect, it's kind of hard with Rublev seeing him match up well with Djokovic. Djokovic does as well as just about anybody blunting these big hitters, and with Rublev, those big cuts at ground strokes are going to be coming back with interest, as they always do with Novak, and he doesn't really seem to have much of a plan B when he's been faced with someone capable of doing that, especially those who are of the upper echelon of men's tennis. And honestly, Marty Fucsovics might end up putting up better resistance against Novak than Rublev could have. He's played Djokovic quite competitively in their 2 meetings. Those 2 meetings are relatively recent. In the scorching heat of New York in the first round, he had Djokovic in a good amount of trouble at a set apiece and looking to go ahead a double break in the 3rd set. The heat ended up getting to both of them in that match, Fucsovics as well, and he struggled to get games after having that opportunity and not being able to convert it. He also played Djokovic relatively tight in Doha when they played in 2019. Djokovic had to come from a set down, and yeah, Fucsovics, his first major quarterfinal. He's really had a nice emergence since 2018, really. The guy's a very tough, fit, and wily veteran, and boy has he gone through the ringer to get here. Jannik Sinner in the first round, albeit inexperienced on the surface, beating Jiri Vesely, who in the past has made some noise on grass. Diego Schwartzman after that, and finally conquering the guy who's been his nemesis this year, and Andrei Rublev, who had really cleaned his clock in 3 meetings, I believe, this year. They were all pretty lopsided. I personally did think that this match would follow that trend and that Fucsovics would get no more than a set, but of all their matches, Marton ended up winning the most meaningful of those matches, the one that took place in a major, and he did it coming back from 2-1 down to ultimately get himself into a maiden major quarterfinal. On the flip side, just a little bit with Rublev, he's had a very solid season. He has continued to be as consistent as ever, usually beating the guys that he should. But unfortunately for him, that's changed in these last 2 slams. Instead of losing to one of the big dogs in Medvedev twice at the Open and Tsitsipas at the French Open in his last couple majors before the French this year, he ended up stumbling even before he could get to those guys in Struff at Roland Garros, and Fucsovics now here. Of course, had a couple of big results on the grass and clay in the tune-up tournament, but you do want to peak for the majors, the biggest tournaments of the year, and as far as that's concerned, Rublev will be disappointed with the opportunities that he has sort of let slip in these past 2 majors. But anyways, in this half, I must say I am most pleasantly surprised by the way Denis Shapovalov has performed in this tournament, especially after how he struggled against Kohlschreiber, who was well past his best days. He needed 5 to beat Philip in the first round. To this point, Shapo has never had success at Wimbledon. I believe he'd only won 1 match there in his career to this point, but his fortunes have definitely changed here. Ever since that Kohlschreiber match, really, he has just been on fire here. Totally shined on center court against the hometown hero in Andy Murray, and really just took the racket out of his hands. In my preview, I did say that I thought Murray could make a semifinal run if his body cooperated. That didn't really happen because I think his first 2 matches took a toll on him, but that being said, I also did say that Shapo would be the one guy in his path there that could take the racket out of his hands, which was most dangerous for him in this state that he is following the hip injury, and that is exactly what ended up happening. He ran into a red-hot Denis Shapovalov, who really just put in a flawless display to blast Murray off the court. But we knew that could happen if he was peaking against this Murray. But perhaps what was even more impressive was today just blazing through Roberto Bautista Agut, especially for the first 2 sets. RBA, the rare Spaniard who probably has clay as his worst surface, a reigning Wimbledon semifinalist from 2019, was basically given the same treatment as Murray, and that was just to have the racket taken out of his hands, basically. And with Denis, really, ever since the pandemic break, I did note back then that I'd seen some significant improvement in him. He made some good results with the US Open. I believe he went 4th round there. And then Rome, he made the semis, played a really good match against Diego Schwartzman. But after that, I was just like, oh, it must be just typical Dennis, blowing hot and cold, because he had a tough start to this year. I was reminded a bit of just how good he can be and what a big match player he is, shining on the biggest stages against the best players when he had Nadal in a heap of trouble at Rome. And after that match, I was just like, God, if this guy could just play smarter and just get a bit more consistent. He is just electric to watch when he's on, and boy, has he been on the last couple rounds here at Wimbledon. He is the one guy that I've changed my mind on in this half, and saying that I think before the final, he presents the greatest threat to Novak Djokovic. Because to a certain degree, when Shapo is redlining, he can take the racket out of pretty much anyone's hands. It's all about whether he can keep up this form. I expect him to make the semifinals now, given Khachanov will be waiting for him in the quarters. But yeah, he just is so well equipped on grass. It's kind of weird how poorly he's done in the past on this surface. He has such great pop on his serve, considering he's not really that tall a guy. You all know the sledgehammer that are both his forehand and his backhand. We've seen that raw power ever since he was a teenager. And man, oh man, I just love watching that kid play. He is just so much fun. He's made me a believer with these last 2 matches in particular. I could realistically see him take a set, maybe 2, off of Djokovic if they are to play in the semis. Of course, beating Novak Djokovic best of 5 really at any event since 2011 has been just a nightmare, and he is among the best at taking your best punch and still staying afloat, and I could see that happening. Obviously, I still think Djokovic is going to win this title, so by proxy, I think he would be able to get through that hypothetical match. But we're not there yet. For Shapo to get there, he's going to have to beat Karen Khachanov, who came through. I think what everyone can agree was one of the weirdest 5-set matches that we have ever seen, not just at Wimbledon, but anywhere. I mean, there's no way that we've ever had a guy win a match after having their serve broken 6 times in a set. And whoever was going to win this match, that was going to be the case for them. It ended up being Khachanov, but roller coaster would be an understatement for this match. It sent Khachanov into his 2nd career major quarterfinal. Big result for him, considering how down a year he's had this season. Never really has reached the highs of his breakout 2018, and I still wouldn't say that's the case here, despite that quarterfinal result. A really good follow on Twitter is Trenton Jocks, who said that with Khachanov and Dimitrov, you can say what you want about them, but fitness has never been a question, and that is so appropriate for this match, considering fitness and serving is really the big things that Khachanov had over Korda this match, and ended up being the difference maker with Sebastian Korda playing his first 5-setter here, and it showed. The young American really looked weary through much of the 5th set. It's kind of a bad look that Khachanov wasn't able to put this match away earlier. I'm pretty sure he served for the match like 3 times before eventually getting over the finish line. And yeah, he is a physical beast, and that's really what carried him in this match. But as far as form is concerned, his form has been nothing to write home about on his way to this quarterfinal. For him, it should be a confidence boost to what has otherwise been a pretty dismal year. He can take solace in that he made it to this quarter without playing his best tennis, but this is as far as I think it'll go for him this year. For Korda, great tournament. He is our next American hope. He'll probably be the top-ranked American by the end of the year. Some really great wins here, beating De Minaur, who is sneaky good on grass, had just won a title in Eastbourne, and then beating Dan Evans on his center court debut. Great experiences all around for the young Korda, and great to see him battle today and in the process continue his rise that has been terrific this year. But Khachanov through there to face Shapovalov in the quarters. On to the bottom half. I mean, first off, nobody, I don't think, is surprised that Matteo Berrettini just plowed through Ilya Ivashka today. Ivashka's had a couple decent results this year, taking a set off Nadal, beating Zverev in Munich. Played Fed pretty tough in Halle, but Berrettini has continued his hot form on grass and from the clay court season, really. Made light work of pretty much everyone he's played so far. Dropped a set to Guido Pella, but not really in much danger there in the first round. Berrettini, another guy, of course, that has made me a believer. He is on the very short list of guys that I think can compete with the Djokovic and have legitimate title hopes. And Matteo has taken full advantage of what's also been a relatively soft draw, but it does mean he'll be fresh for the business end of this tournament. I picked him to the final. He's looked great so far and hasn't really given me much reason to move off that. I am, however, pleasantly surprised to see that his opponent in the quarters will be Felix Auger-Aliassime. A guy that, if you knew me in 2019, that I was all up on that bandwagon for and thought that I had found my next guy to pull for in life post Nadal. I even went as far back then as to give him the name Baby Goat, and obviously the way that things unfolded by pretty much after mid-2019, I had to chill on the Felix hype. His progress kind of stagnated a bit, and albeit Felix did improve massively at the beginning of this year, you could see it. He fixed a lot of the issues with his ball toss that had really seen him run into double fault issues in a couple of matches. But those improvements were overshadowed by the disappointment of him still not being able to capture his first title despite making, I believe, 2 more finals this year, as well as his inability to close out Karatsev 2 sets up to make the quarters in Australia, and then the subpar clay season. But we've arrived on the grass here, and really, we've seen it ever since 2019. FAA is very comfortable on the grass. It's probably his best surface right now. It's the one place where he doesn't overthink nearly as much as far as shot selection. That's probably his biggest issue. And with the grass forcing you into making so many split-second decisions, he really just seems to have way more clarity out there. Made the final in Stuttgart, lost to Cilic, who is still excellent on grass as we found out this year. Beat Federer, a win for the rocking chair. In Halle, made the semis there, I believe, losing to the eventual champion Humbert in a very tight one. And now this. Say what you want about Felix's struggles in finals. They are totally warranted, but his match today was bigger, with all due respect, than any of those finals. None of those were thousands, none of those were deep in slams. This was one that Felix really had to have And for the first time really coming through on a stage this big, in a moment this big, you have to wonder whether this finally might de-chicken Felix mentally and finally flip that switch back again to where he continues on an upward trajectory. Now, by no means did Felix play some perfect mental titan of a match here, but it took some cojones, man, to come back from 4-2 down, a break in each of the first two sets. Also in the second set breaker, after being in a commanding position up 4-1 in the breaker, I believe he had Sasha come all the way back and even have a set point. But from down set point, Felix played some ballsy points at net. He played terrific at net today, but 2 straight points from set point down in the breaker at net. One where he got lucky on the second one, kind of a mishit, but it ended up working out for him. And then ultimately returning a Sasha Zverev go for broke second serve where he just hit it as hard as he would hit a first, and Felix was able to get that back, turn the point around, and go up 2 sets. Over the next 2 sets, he did proceed to pretty much let Zverev back into this match, but I mean, if you have watched Sasha Zverev over the last 4 or 5 years or so, his Achilles heel in the second serve ended up biting him in the ass today. Just one of those Sasha Zverev matches on his second serve. 20 doubles for the match, a lot of them untimely. In fact, he pretty much undid all the momentum he'd gathered in the third and fourth sets in the very first game of the fifth. He served 3 double faults to ultimately get broken at 30. He did level the fifth again, but the damage was done as far as just halting his own momentum and putting them back on even footing. And Felix eventually, shortly after, was able to regain the break and ended up holding steady to the finish line. Now, I certainly did not see this coming. I thought FAA did have a chance, but I just said Sasha in 4, maybe 5. I could have seen 5. But this is the win of FAA's career to this point. Very, very happy for him. Concluding a historic day for Canadian tennis. Zverev, you gotta fix that second serve. That's been clear as day for years, but the man just refuses to lower his ball toss. He's improved massively in majors since the start of 2020, but it's gotta be tough the way he's succumbed to some of his next-gen peers. Sinner at the French, Tsitsipas at the French this year, and now Felix at Wimbledon. I almost feel like making that US Open final in such a depleted field and doing it as unimpressively, quite frankly, as Sasha did, it was almost a bad thing. It's kind of, I don't want to say made him content, but I mean, to some extent, yeah, he seems kind of complacent to stay the same player he is and think that's gonna be good enough because he was this close to winning his first major in New York. He's never been good on grass, but yeah, it's back to the drawing board for him, heading back onto his favorite surface on hard courts. And lastly, we have the ageless wonder. I know that hearing Roger Federer into the quarters at Wimbledon seems like it's just normal. We've been hearing it for almost 2 decades, but this year especially, I assure you, this ain't normal. The guy is almost exactly a month away from his 40th birthday, and let's face it, he's really been the most mortal at his kingdom at Wimbledon this year, as he has been really ever since he first won it. Hell, maybe even before that. And that's even taking 2013 and 2016 into account. you could make a good argument that he's lucky to still be in this tournament given his struggles in the first round and how that match ended up concluding. But ever since that first round, really, he's gotten significantly better. Gasquet is just all of the big three's pigeon, so that was a good get-right match. Cam Norrie having a career year and borderline top 10 in the race this year was quite unimpressive for 2 sets. Most of 2 sets in their third round match came to life in the third. Federer played an atrocious game to give up the third, but he very easily could have let that match slip from that point. And you've seen certain lapses like that end up costing Fed matches in the past. You don't have to look too far back with how he lost to Kevin Anderson in 2018 here. But anyways, just being able to right the ship, stop the bleeding, was very impressive from Federer. And then today against Lorenzo Sonego, got off to another slow, sloppy start as he has in pretty much every match he's played so far here at Wimbledon. But boy, did Fed heat up here in the last 2 sets. Another lapse in closing time in the first set when he served for it, played another terrible game there. But slow starts and those closing time lapses have really been the only flaw in Fed relative to what he is right now and his play following the first round. But today, especially after that first set, he really picked up his play today. Played by far his best match of this year and just looked vintage over the last 2 sets today. He played great. I still don't think that he's playing at the level that he did in 2019. I think there's still a couple notches that he needs to go up from here in order to match that level. But he doesn't necessarily have to be up there, with it being a lesser field at the moment. And today really was the last match that you would say Fed was definitively a favorite for. Assuming he gets Medvedev in his quarterfinal match, I would say Medi is a slight favorite there. But considering he'll be an underdog from here on out, you do hope that he can play with house money, play with nothing to lose, as he did through pretty much third round on at the Aussie Open in 2017. Obviously not to that extent. You don't expect that to happen 4 years on and 2 knee surgeries more later. But it is Roger Federer, it is grass, it is Wimbledon. He can make magic happen. And if he can get sharper, if he can take out some of those lapses and slow starts while building on the form he had through the second half of the Sonego match, I would say that he certainly has a chance to be right there as a legitimate contender at the business end of this tournament. Of course, we don't know who his opponent will be yet, but he did catch a little bit of a break there with Medvedev and Hurkacz inexplicably not being able to finish tonight. I do think it will be Medvedev. He looked very impressive in the Hurkacz match. Just played a little bit of a loose tiebreak. But aside from that, he was really dominating on serve, playing terrific. And yeah, maybe Hurkacz, who did take Djokovic 4 here in 2019, can perhaps extend this to a 5th set, but I do expect Daniil to come through. I'd lean 4 sets for him there. That would obviously be preferable for him to just be out there for a couple of games tomorrow, especially after having to come back from 2 sets down earlier against Cilic. Medvedev is playing alright. I thought that he'd be better at Wimbledon this year. Considering it's the first time he is playing this event since becoming an elite player in the summer of 2019. Obviously didn't get to play last year because the event wasn't held. But with his really pinpoint accurate serving and really flat ground strokes that stay low to the ground, you thought that it theoretically makes sense that Medvedev could end up being really well suited to the grass. He has done well to beat two dangerous opponents in Struff and then Cilic in his first and third rounds, and I expect him to make a quarter here. Could go beyond that, but we will see with the conclusion of that match. Well, update, now we know how that match ended up going. I woke up, checked the score, and saw 6-3, 6-3 Hurkacz over the next two sets. And wow, I am stunned. I cannot believe that match went that routinely after the restart today. Hurkacz, who before this tournament had been going through a miserable spell of form ever since breaking through to win his biggest title in Miami, really just flipped the switch here at Wimbledon, albeit he played a pretty soft draw to get to this Medvedev match, but I don't think he was broken. I don't think he dropped a set. And now here he is, also heading to a maiden slam quarterfinal, and doing it beating the world number 2 no less in Daniil Medvedev. It appears, I didn't watch the remainder of this match today, but it does appear that Hurkacz and his command of the net were really what made the difference here. 50 of 69 net approaches converted for Hubie. That's just terrific. That's brilliant to have the presence of mind to repeatedly come up to net that many times, with Medvedev being such a great defender. But to recognize that that was one of his best routes to finish off points against the Russian, just phenomenal. Tough luck for Daniil, who, based off his comments in press and just how routinely this went, didn't seem to be at his best on the second day of this match. Had a real opportunity to do something great at Wimbledon this year, at least make a deep run, but his first quarter here will have to wait. And now obviously you look ahead and Federer's quarterfinal looks a lot more manageable, albeit Hurkacz is probably still going to be a tough out, but I'm sure Roger and his fans would have been cheering for this result on the resumption today. So yeah, muy interesante with these quarter matchups ahead. Since I've already made such a long ass video and pretty much alluded to what I think of some of these matchups, I'm gonna just give my predictions right now. I am tempted to say Djokovic in 4, but give me Djokovic in 3, give me Shapovalov also in straights. I'll say Berrettini in 4, and then I'll say Fed in 4. And that about does it for me. I hope you all enjoyed Manic Monday as much as I did, getting to just laze around and take a solid block of my day just watching some crazy matches. It was a hell of a send-off for this long-standing tradition. Thank you for watching this video. Of course, if you enjoyed, you know the drill. Leave a like, would be much appreciated. Subscribe to the channel if you're new or haven't already. I appreciate y'all for watching, and of course, I will see y'all in the next one.